Alright, so I did my presentation on the 10 superheroes and supervillains that I personally think they deserve their own movies. Not counting the ones that have animated series, I'm talking about live action films because they're a lot more interesting and a lot more fun to watch. You've got your basic DC and your Marvel comic franchises. Those are the main two I'm basing them off of, but a couple of them have lower level comics that have produced them. I'm talking about the lanterns here. You guys know there's a Green Lantern, right? But there's actually a ton more. There's red is for rage, orange is for greed, yellow is for fear. Green is actually willpower, which is my personal least favorite, but he's the most popular. Blue is for hope, violet is love, indigo is compassion, and black is the lantern of death, which I think is kind of cool. Raise the dead. You just want a movie about zombies, right? There's even an unofficial white lantern, and he is the lantern of light. They all kind of need the Green Lantern to be able to sustain their powers, which I guess is why he's the most popular, but he's honestly, I think, the lamest power, willpower, rather than be able to raise the dead than make someone do something. But that's just me. I love the She-Hulk. I think it's super cool. Her backstory is really interesting. She is the cousin of Bruce Banner, who you may not know is the Incredible Hulk. Her father was a cop detective. He was killed by some mob boss, and she was shot as revenge because her father dying wasn't bad enough. They had to shoot her too. She needed a blood transfusion, so Bruce Banner, her cousin, the Incredible Hulk, was the only match they could find for her at that really crucial time where she needed blood. So they gave her a blood transfusion, and she was turned into the She-Hulk. Norbert Sykes is the Badger. I actually have to look into him because I've never heard of him before, but his backstory is weird but super, super cool. He has multiple personality disorder, and he decides to go into the army. For whatever reason, it's all him. He ends up getting captured in Vietnam by the Viet Cong, and while prisoner, he eats roaches to sustain his life. So God actually appears to him in the form of a giant badger named Myrtle. I'm not making this up, I promise. And God gives him the power to talk to all creatures and any creatures, whatever he so pleases. So I just think that backstory and the vision of how they want a giant badger to speak to him to give him the power to talk to animals, I think that's pretty interesting. Storm, I love the X-Men. Wolverine's my favorite, but he's got his own movie, so that's clearly taken. Storm, her name's Aurora Monroe. She was the queen of a fictitious African land called Wakanda. Horrible husband, abusive, kind of crazy, a little insane, and she had these awesome powers. So she was actually one of the first, recruited by Professor X, later the creator of the X-Men. And he took her in, let her become the mutant that she was, and he didn't abuse her like her horrible husband. Black Condor, I also had to look into him. He's pretty interesting. He was just orphaned as an infant, like less than 3 years old by his parents for whatsoever reason, probably because of his freakiness. He was actually adopted by highly intelligent condors, like the birds. They're just, for some reason, they're geniuses and they adopt him. And they teach him to fly. And he becomes very, very famous because there is a senator who's about to be assassinated, and he attempts but fails to stop the assassination. And they look so similar that he just kind of steals the senator's identity and becomes senator by day and Black Condor by night. And I think that'd be really, really interesting to watch on film with a live action player. Maybe Matt Damon, I find him pretty cute. I don't really like Spider-Man. I'm not a fan of the whole shooting web thing. I don't think it's fantastic that much. But you guys might know Venom is like the alien symbiote that kind of tries to take over Spider-Man and a couple of them. What happens is this alien symbiote, Venom, there's a piece of it left after some crazy climax ending, and it gets into the bloodstream of this serial killer homicidal maniac called Cletus Cassidy. And that's pretty much it. He's just a serial killer murderer who becomes this alien monster that just develops inside of him, and he's still a serial killer murderer. It's just really, really interesting because the costume design and the idea that for some reason this alien wants to control this murder because it's not tough enough. Then there's Composite Superman. I'm not making this up, I totally promise. There is he's a diver, like a swim diver, called Joseph Meach. His career is centering. Diving can only be so spectacular, and he wants to do this awesome publicity stunt to dive off a building into this pool of water. Unbeknownst to him, the pool is actually leaking, so to save his life, Superman swoops in and saves him before he splats on the ground. Joseph doesn't know this, so he's freaking out like, you ruined my life, because his career is completely over. He had to be saved by Superman in the middle of a stunt. No one really cares about him anymore. He's in the ditch. His career's over with. So to help him out, Superman actually gives him a job at this really cool museum that is actually full of memorabilia from Superman. So during this crazy lightning storm, Joseph Meach is taking care of the collectibles and probably muttering under his breath about how much he hates Superman. He gets struck by this lightning storm, and this radioactive material that Superman brought back from his home planet, it seeps into him once the lightning hits, and he becomes a morphable man. He can morph into anyone he wants. So he decides to morph into Superman and Batman to take, I don't know why Batman. It's never discussed why he wants revenge against Batman, but he's turns into both of them at the same time to take revenge on Superman and Batman. And I think it's awesome because in the midst of the fight, his powers completely deplete. He's just normal Joseph again, and they totally just kick his butt for being such a jerk in the first place and trying to take revenge over something that really wasn't their fault. I think Thanos is really cool. I'm into Greek mythology, and Thanos is roughly in it for a really short period of time, but Thanos is actually, he's this godlike man, godlike creature, really, and his skin is just invincible, nothing can touch him. He was even cursed by death himself, so he can't die. He's supposed to be immortal. And I think he's really cool only because, for one, he's immortal. And all of his enemies are the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and the Justice League. So I think a montage of that movie would be so sick, just to see all those characters in one totally fighting against a common goal, instead of fighting about who's better, Batman or Superman. I think that'd be really cool. I love Batman, so Harley Quinn and Joker may not be a surprise to you guys. Joker doesn't actually have an official backstory. He's had similar writers, and they've rewritten his story over and over again, but they've never even decided against one common one. There's plenty of different kinds. There's already movies with Joker in them, and he's given a backstory, but none of them are official, and they're not singularly Joker movies. So I think a Joker about him and his cohort, Harley Quinn, who is actually, she has an official backstory, and she was a psychologist intern at Arkham Asylum, where Joker is being imprisoned. She, for some reason, falls in love with this whack job, and she decides that every time he's in Arkham Asylum, I'm just going to help him get out. So she falls in love with him and just helps him escape every single time, and then becomes his just as crazy but kind of romance partner, because he doesn't like her, but she just can't stop going after him. Cyborg Superman. All the funky Supermans are just super, super cool to me. And Cyborg Superman, his name was Hank Henshaw. I forgot to write it down. But Hank Henshaw is an astronaut along with his wife and two other friends. There's this insane explosion up in space that Superman didn't know about, so he didn't try to save him. But Lex Luthor has some awesome laboratory up there, and Lex Luthor's up in space, and he sees this thing about to go down, so he saves Hank, but isn't able to save Hank's wife or the two friends. Hank is just beaming with, he's just so mad and so upset because Superman didn't do anything, and his wife's dead. I'd be kind of upset if my husband was dead. His two best buddies, they're gone, astronauts, what are you gonna do? But, so Lex Luthor, Hank's body is it's completely burned. There's radioactive material all up in him, and he's not gonna live much longer. So Lex Luthor helps him develop this mechanic biological suit, and he wants the biological part to look like Superman so he can get revenge on Superman, because he didn't know, but it's gotta be his fault, right? So I'm not actually even sure how he's defeated, but I know it's gonna end up in a massive explosion, something really, really cool. The city's gonna be depleted probably, but it's gonna be really awesome. So I think a fight scene between the Terminator and Superman is going to be really awesome. And how can you really go wrong? I mean, Superman's not my favorite, but he's pretty